set out for Armentières the next morning at daybreak, and to go to Armentières each by a different route. Blanchett, the most intelligent of the four, was to follow that by which the carriage had gone, upon which the four friends had fired, and which was accompanied, as may be remembered, by Rochefort's servant. Athos sent the lackeys to work first, because, since these men had been in the service of himself and his friends, he had discovered in each of them different and essential qualities. Then lackeys who asked questions inspire less mistrust than masters, and meet with more sympathies among those they address. Besides, Milady knew the masters and did not know the lackeys, while on the contrary the lackeys knew Milady perfectly well. All four were to meet the next day at 11 o'clock if they had discovered Milady's retreat. Three were to remain on guard. The fourth was to return to Bethune to inform Athos and serve as a guide to the four friends. These dispositions arranged, the lackeys retired. Athos then arose from his chair, girded on his sword, enveloped himself in his cloak, and left the hotel. It was nearly 10 o'clock. At 10 o'clock in the evening, it is well known, the streets in provincial towns are very little frequented. Athos, nevertheless, was visibly anxious to find someone of whom he could ask a question. At length he met a belated passenger, went up to him, and spoke a few words to him. The man he addressed drew back with terror, and only answered the musketeer by an indication. Athos offered them half a pistole to accompany him, but the man refused. Athos then plunged into the street the man had pointed out to with his finger, but arriving at four crossroads, he stopped again, visibly embarrassed. Nevertheless, as the crossroads offered him a better chance than any other place of meeting somebody, he stood still. In a few minutes, a night watch passed. Athos repeated to him the same question he had asked the first person he had met. The night watch evinced the same terror, refused in his turn to accompany Athos, and only pointed with his hand to the road he was to take. Athos walked in the direction indicated and reached the Faubourg, situated at the extremity of the city, opposite that by which he and his friends had entered it. There he again appeared uneasy and embarrassed, and stopped for the third time. Fortunately, a mendicant passed, who, coming up to Athos to ask for charity, Athos offered him half a crown to accompany him where he was going. The mendicant hesitated at first, but at the sight of the piece of silver which shone in the darkness, he consented and walked on before Athos. When arrived at the angle of a street, he pointed to a small house, isolated, solitary, and dismal. Athos went toward the house, while the mendicant who had received his reward hobbled off as fast as his legs would carry him. Athos went round the house before he could distinguish the door. Amid the red color in which it was painted, no light appeared through the chinks of the shutters. No noise gave reason to believe that it was inhabited. It was dark and silent as the tomb. 3 times Athos knocked without receiving any answer. At the third knock, however, steps were heard inside. The door at length was opened, and a man of high stature, pale complexion, and black hair and beard appeared. Athos and he exchanged some words in a low voice. Then the tall man made a sign to the musketeer that he might come in. Athos immediately took advantage of the permission, and the door was closed after them. The man whom Athos had come so far to seek, and whom he had found with so much trouble, introduced him into his laboratory, where he was engaged in fastening together with iron wire the dry bones of a skeleton. All the frame was adjusted except the head, which lay upon the table. All the rest of the furniture indicated that the inhabitant of the house was engaged in the study of the natural sciences. There were large bottles filled with serpents, ticketed according to their species, dried lizards shone like emeralds set in great squares of black wood, and bunches of wild odoriferous herbs, doubtless possessed of virtues unknown to common men, were fastened to the ceiling and hung down in the corners of the apartment. But there was no family, no servant, the tall man inhabited this house alone. Athos cast a cold and indifferent glance upon the objects we have described, and at the invitation of him he came to seek, he sat down near him. Then he explained to him the cause of his visit and the service he required of them. But scarcely had he expressed his request than the unknown who remained standing before the musketeer drew back with signs of terror and refused. Then Athos took from his pocket a small paper upon which were written 2 lines, accompanied by a signature and a seal, and presented them to him who he had given to prematurely these signs of repugnance. The tall man had scarcely read these lines, seen the signature, and recognized the seal when he bowed to denote that he had no longer any objection to make and that he was ready to obey. Athos required no more. He arose, bowed, went out, returned by the same way he came, re-entered the hotel, and went to his apartment. At daybreak, D'Artagnan came to him and asked him what was to be done. Wait, replied Athos, some minutes after the superior of the Covenant sent to inform the musketeers that the burial would take place at midday. As to the prisoner, they heard no tidings of her whatever, and only she must have made her escape through the garden upon the sand of which her footsteps could be traced, and the door of which had been found shut, the key had disappeared. At the hour appointed, Lord de Winter and the 4 friends repaired to the convent. The bells tolled, the chapel was open, but the grating of the choir was closed. In the middle of the choir, the body of the victim, clothed in her novitiate dress, was exposed. On each side of the choir and behind the gratings opening up the convent was assembled the whole community of the Carmelites, who listened to the divine service and mingled their chants with the chants of the priests, without seeing the profane or being seen by them. At the door of the chapel, D'Artagnan felt his courage fail again and returned to look for Athos, but Athos had disappeared. Faithful to his mission of vengeance, Athos had requested to be conducted to the garden, and there upon the sand, following the light steps of this woman, who had left a bloody track wherever she had gone, he advanced toward the gate which led into the wood, and causing it to be opened, he went out into the forest. Then all his suspicions were confirmed. The road by which the carriage had disappeared went round the forest. Athos followed the road for some time, his eyes fixed upon the ground. Slight stains of blood which came from the wound inflicted upon the man who accompanied the carriage as a courier, or from one of the horses, were to be seen on this road. Slight stains of blood which came from the wound inflicted upon the man who accompanied the carriage as a courier, or from one of the horses, were to be seen on the road at the end of about 3/4 of a league. Within 50 paces of Vestibert, a larger bloodstain appeared. The ground was trampled by horses. Between the forest and this accursed spot, a little behind the trampled ground, was the same track of small feet as in the garden. The carriage then had stopped here. At this spot, Milady had come out of the wood and got into the carriage. Satisfied with this discovery, which confirmed all his suspicions, Athos returned to the hotel and found Planchet impatiently waiting for him. Everything was as Athos had foreseen. Planchet had followed the road. Like Athos, he had discovered the stains of blood. Like Athos, he had remarked the spot where the horses had stopped, but he had gone further than Athos, so that at the village of Vestibert, while drinking at an auberge, he had learned, without asking a question, that the evening before, at about 8:30, a wounded man who accompanied a lady traveling in a post-chaise had been obliged to stop, being unable to go any further. The wound was attributed to thieves who had stopped the chaise in the wood. The man remained in the village. The lady had had a relay of horses and continued her journey. Planchet went in search of the postillion who had driven her, and found him. He had taken the lady as far as Fromelles, and from Fromelles she set out for Armentieres. showed him by 7 o'clock in the morning he was at Armentieres. There was but one hotel, that of the Post. Blanchett went him and presented himself as a lackey out of place who was in search of a situation. He had not chatted 10 minutes with the people of the auberge before he learned that a lady had come there about 11 o'clock the night before, alone, had engaged a chamber, had sent for the master of the hotel, and told him that she was desirous to remain for some time in that neighborhood. Blanchett did not want to know any more. He hastened to the rendezvous, found the lackeys at their posts, placed them as sentinels at all issues of the hotel, and came to find Athos, who had just received his information when his friends returned. All their countenances were melancholy and anxious, even the mild countenance of Aramis. "What is to be done?" said D'Artagnan. "Wait," replied Athos. Everyone went to his own apartment. At 8 o'clock in the evening, Athos ordered the horses to be saddled, and had Lord de Winter and his friends informed that they must prepare for the expedition. In an instant, all 5 were ready. Everyone examined his arms and put them in order. Athos came down the last and found D'Artagnan already mounted and growing impatient. "Patience," cried Athos, "one of our party is still wanting." The 4 horsemen looked round with astonishment, for they sought uselessly in their minds who this other person they wanted could be. At this moment, Blanchett brought out Athos's horse. The musketeer leaped lightly into the saddle. "Wait for me," cried he, "I will soon be back," and set off at a gallop. In a quarter of an hour he returned, accompanied by a tall man, masked and enveloped in a large red cloak. Lord de Winter and the 3 musketeers looked at each other inquiringly. None of them could give the others any information, for all were ignorant who this man could be. Nevertheless, they felt convinced that this ought to be so, as it was done by Athos. At 9 o'clock, guided by Blanchett, the little cavalcade set out, taking the route the carriage had taken. It was a melancholy sight, that of these 6 men traveling in silence, each plunged in his own thoughts, sad as despair, dark as punishment. Chapter 65. Trial. It was a stormy and dark night. Vast clouds covered the heavens, concealing the stars. The moon would not rise much before midnight, occasionally by the light of a flash of lightning which gleamed across the horizon. The road appeared before them, white and solitary. The flash instinct, all remained in darkness. At every instant Athos was forced to restrain D'Artagnan, constantly in advance of the little troop, and to beg him to keep his rank, which at the end of a minute he again departed from. He had but one thought, which was to go forward and endeavored to enter the conversation with the man in the red cloak, but to every interrogation but to him, he bowed without making any reply. The travelers then comprehended that there must be some reason why the unknown preserved such a silence and said no more to him. The storm came on. The flashes succeeded each other more rapidly. The thunder began to growl, and the wind, the precursor of a hurricane, whistled in the plumes and the hair of the horsemen. The cavalcade trotted on more sharply a little before they came from hills. The storm burst in all its fury upon them. They unfolded their cloaks. They had still 3 leagues to travel, and they performed in amid torrents of rain. D'Artagnan took off his hat and could not be persuaded to make use of his cloak. He found ease in feeling the water trickle over his burning brow and down his feverish body. At the moment the little troop had passed Goskell and were approaching the port, a man sheltered beneath a tree left the trunk of it with which he had been confounded in the darkness, and advanced into the middle of the road with his finger on his lips. Athos recognized Grimaud. "What's the matter?" cried Athos. As she left Armentières, Grimaud made a sign in the affirmative. D'Artagnan ground his teeth. "Silence, D'Artagnan," said Athos. "I have charged myself with this affair. It is for me, then, to interrogate Grimaud." "Where is she?" asked Athos. Grimaud stretched out his hands in the direction of Lies. "Far from here," asked Athos. Grimaud showed his master his forefinger bent. "Alone?" asked Athos. Grimaud made a sign that she was. "Gentlemen," said Athos, "she is alone, within half a league of us, in the direction of the river." "That's well," said D'Artagnan. "Lead us on, Grimaud." Grimaud took his course across the country and acted as a guide to the cavalcade. At the end of about 500 paces they came to a rivulet which they forded. By the aid of the lightning they could perceive the village of Eniguem. "Is she there?" said D'Artagnan. Asked D'Artagnan of Athos. Grimaud shook his head negatively. "Silence, then," cried Athos, and the troop continued their routes. Another flash enlightened all around them. Grimaud extended his arm, and by the blue splendor of the serpent of fire they distinguished a little isolated house on the banks of the river within 100 paces of a ferry. "This is the place," said Athos. At this moment a man who had been crouching in a ditch jumped up and came toward them. It was Mousqueton. He pointed with his finger to the window with the light in it. "She is in there," said he. "And Bazin?" asked Athos. "While I kept my eye on the window, he guarded the door." "All is well," said Athos. "You are good and faithful servants." Athos sprang from his horse, gave the bridle to Grimaud, and advanced toward the window after having made a sign to the rest of the troop to go toward the door. The little house was surrounded by a low, quickset hedge of 2 or 3 feet high. Athos sprang over the edge and went up to the window, which was without shutters, but had the half curtain drawn closely. He got upon the skirting stone to enable him to look over the curtain. By the light of a lamp he saw a woman enveloped in a mantle of a dark color, seated upon a joint stool near the dying embers of a fire. Her elbows were placed upon a mead table, and she leaned her head upon her 2 hands, which were white as ivory. He could not distinguish her countenances, but a sinister smile passed over the lips of Athos. He could not be deceived. It was the woman he saw. At this moment, one of the horses neighed. Milady raised her head, saw the pale face of Athos close to the window, and screamed with terror. Athos, perceiving that she knew him, pushed the window with his knee and hand. It yielded. The frame and glass were broken to shivers, and Athos, like the spectre of vengeance, sprang into the room. Milady rushed to the door and opened it, but still more pale and menacing than Athos, D'Artagnan stood on the sill of it. Milady drew back, uttering a cry. D'Artagnan, believing she might have means of flight, and fearing she should escape, drew a pistol from his belt, but Athos raised his hand. "Put back that weapon, D'Artagnan," said he. "This woman must be judged, not assassinated. Wait but a little, my friend, and you shall be satisfied. Come in, gentlemen." D'Artagnan obeyed, for Athos had the solemn voice and the powerful gesture of a judge sent by the Lord himself. Behind D'Artagnan entered Porthos, Aramis, Lord de Winter, and the man in the red cloak. The four lackeys guarded the door and the window. Milady had sunk into a chair, with her hands extended, as if to conjure away this terrible apparition. On perceiving her brother-in-law, an agonized cry of surprise and fright burst from her lips. "What do you want?" screamed Milady. "We want," said Athos, "Charlotte Buxton, who first was called Countess de la Fere, and afterward Lady de Winter, Baroness de Sheffield." That is I," murmured Milady in extreme terror. "What do you want with me?" "We want to judge you according to your crime," said Athos. "You shall be free to defend yourself. Justify yourself if you can. Monsieur D'Artagnan, it is for you to accuse her first." D'Artagnan advanced. "Before God and before men," said he, "I accuse this woman of having poisoned Constance Bonacieux, who died yesterday evening." He turned toward Porthos and Aramis. "We bear witness to this," said the two musketeers with one voice. D'Artagnan continued, "Before God and before men, I accuse this woman of having attempted to poison me in wine which she sent me from Villeroy with a forged letter, as if that wine came from my friends. God preserved me, but a man named Brismont died in my place." "We bear witness to this," said Porthos and Aramis in the same manner as before. "Before God and before men, I accuse this woman of having urged me to murder the Baron de Wardes, and of having employed assassins to shoot me, from whom I was again preserved by God's providence. But, as none can bear witness to these facts, I attest them myself. I have done." And Monsieur D'Artagnan passed to the other side of the room to Porthos and Aramis. "It is your turn, Milady," said Athos. The Baron came forward. "Before God and before men," said he, "I accuse this woman of having been the means of the assassination of the Duke of Buckingham." "The Duke of Buckingham assassinated!" cried all present with one voice. "Yes," said the Baron, "assassinated upon receiving the warning letter you wrote to me. I caused this woman to be arrested and gave her in charge to a loyal servant. She corrupted this man. She placed the poniard in his hand. She made him kill the Duke, and at this moment, perhaps this assassin is paying with his head for the crime of this fury." A shudder crept through the frames of the judges at the revelation of such unheard of crimes. "That is not all," resumed Lord de Winter. "My brother, who made you his heir, died in 3 hours of a strange disorder, which left livid traces behind it all over the body. Sister, how did your husband die?" "Horror, horror," cried Porthos and Aramis. "Assassin of Buckingham, assassin of Felton, assassin of my brother. I demand justice upon you, and I swear that if it be not granted to me, I will execute it myself." And Lord de Winter ranged himself by the side of D'Artagnan, leaving the place free for another accuser. Milady let her head sink between her two hands, and endeavored to recall her ideas, which whirled about in a mortal vertigo. "It is my turn," said Athos, himself trembling as the lion trembles at the sight of the serpent. "It is my turn. I married that woman when she was a young girl. I married her in opposition to the wishes of all my family. I gave her my wealth, I gave her my name, and one day I discovered that this woman was branded. This woman was marked with a fleur-de-lis on her left shoulder. Oh," said Milady, "I defy you to find any tribunal which pronounced such an infamous sentence against me. I defy you to find him who executed it." "Silence," cried a hollow voice. "It is for me to reply to that," and the man in the red cloak came forward in his turn. "What man is that? What man is that?" cried Milady, suffocated by terror, her hair unknotting and rising over her livid countenance as if alive. All eyes were turned toward this man, for to all except Athos he was unknown, and even Athos looked at him with as much stupefaction "Help! Help!" screamed she, turning toward the wall as if she would tear it opening with her hands. "Who are you then?" cried all the witnesses of this scene. "Ask that woman," said the man in the red cloak, "for you may plainly see she knows me." "The executioner of a lily! The executioner of a lily!" cried Milady, a prey to wild terror, and clinging with her hands to the wall to avoid falling. Even one drew back, and the man in the red cloak remained standing alone in the middle of the room. "Oh, pardon, pardon!" cried the miserable woman, falling on her knees. The unknown waited for silence, and then, "I told you so. I was sure she would know me," resumed he. "Yes, I am the executioner of Lily, and this is my history." All eyes were fixed upon this man, whose words were listened to with anxious attention. That woman was formerly a young maiden, as beautiful as she is now. She was a man in the convent of the Benedictines of Templemore. A young priest of a simple and trustful heart performed the duties of the church of that convent. She undertook his seduction and succeeded. She would have seduced a saint. Their vows were sacred and irrevocable. Their connection could not last long without ruining both. She prevailed upon him to leave the country, but to leave the country to fly together, to reach another part of France where they might live at ease, because unknown money was necessary. Neither of them had any. The priest stole the sacred vases and sold them, but as they were preparing to escape together, they were both arrested. Within a week she seduced the son of the jailer and got away. The young priest was condemned to 10 years of imprisonment and to be branded. I was executioner of the city of Lily, as this woman has said, and the guilty man, gentleman, was my brother. I then swore that this woman who had ruined him, who was more than his accomplice, since she had induced him to commit the crime, should at least share his punishment. I suspected where she was concealed. I followed her, I caught her, I bound her, and I impressed the same disgraceful mark upon her that I had branded upon my poor brother. The day after my return to Lily, my brother in his turn succeeded in making his escape. I was accused of complicity and was condemned to remain in his place until he should be again a prisoner. My poor brother was ignorant of this sentence. He rejoined this woman. They fled together into Berry, and there he obtained a little curacy. This woman passed for his sister. The lord of the estate upon which the church of the curacy was situated saw this pretended sister and became enamored of her, so much so that he offered to marry her. Then she left him she had ruined. For him she was destined to ruin, and became the Countess de la Fere. All eyes were turned toward Athos, whose real name was that, and who made a sign with his head that all was true that the executioner had said. "Then," resumed he, "mad, desperate, and determined to get rid of an existence from which she had taken away everything, both honor and happiness, my poor brother returned to Lily, and learning the sentence which had condemned me in his place, surrendered himself and hung himself that same night from the iron bar of the loophole of his prison." To render justice to them who had condemned me, they kept their word. As soon as the identity of my brother was proved, I was set at liberty. That is the crime of which I accuse her. That is the cause of her being branded. Monsieur d'Artagnan, said Athos, what is the penalty you demand against this woman? My lord, the punishment of death, replied D'Artagnan. My lord de Winter, continued Athos, what is the penalty you demand against this woman? The punishment of death, said Lord de Winter. Messieurs Porthos and Aramis, again, said Athos, you who are their judges, what is the sentence you pronounce upon this woman? The punishment of death, replied the Musketeers in his stern, hollow voice. Milady uttered a frightful shriek, and dragged herself along several paces toward her judges upon her knees. Athos stretched out his hand toward her. Charlotte Paxton, Countess de la Fere, Milady de Winter, said he, your crimes have wearied men on earth, and God in heaven, if you know any prayer, say it, for you are condemned, and you shall die. At these words, which left no hope, Milady raised herself up to her full height and endeavored to speak, but her strength failed her. She felt that a powerful, implacable hand seized her by the hair and dragged her away as irrevocably as hospitality drags of the man. She did not therefore even attempt to make the least resistance, and went out of the cottage. Lord de Winter, D'Artagnan, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis went out close behind her and the executioner. The lackeys followed their masters, and the chamber was left solitary, with its broken window, its open door, and its smoky lamp burning dimly on the table. Chapter 66, Execution. It was near midnight. The moon, lessened by its decline and reddened by the last 3 traces of the storm, arose behind the little town of Armentieres, which showed against its pale light the dark outline of its houses and the outline of its high belfry. In front of them, the Lys rolled its waves like a river of melted lead, while on the other side was a black mass of trees cutting a stormy sky, invaded by the large coppery clouds which created a sort of twilight. Amid the night, on the left, was an old abandoned mill, with its motionless wings, from the ruins of which an owl threw out its shrill, periodical and monotonous cry. On the right and on the left of the road which the dismal cortege pursued, appeared a few low, stunted trees which looked like deformed dwarfs, crouching down to watch men and travelling at the sinister hour. From time to time, a broad sheet of lightning opened its horizon in its whole width, darted like a serpent over the black mass of trees, and like a terrible scimitar divided the heavens and the waters into 2 parts. Not a breath of wind now disturbed the heavy atmosphere. A death-like silence oppressed all nature. The soil was humid and glittering with the rain which had recently fallen, and the refreshed herbs threw forth their perfume with additional energy. 2 of the lackeys now led, or rather dragged, along Milady by the arms. The executioner walked behind them, and Lord de Winter, D'Artagnan, Porthos, and Aramis walked behind the executioner. Planchet and Bazin came last. The 2 lackeys led Milady to the banks of the river. Her mouth was mute, but her eyes spoke with their inexpressible eloquence, supplicating by turns each of those she looked at. Being a few paces in advance, she whispered to the lackeys, 1,000 pistoles to each of you if you will assist my escape. But if you deliver me up to your masters, I have near at hand avengers who will make you pay for my death very dearly. Grimaud hesitated. Mousqueton trembled in all his members. Athos, who heard Milady's voice, came sharply up. Lord de Winter did the same. Change these lackeys, said he. She has spoken to them. They are no longer safe. Planchet and Bazin were called forward and took the places of Grimaud and Mousqueton. I shall be avenged. You are not a woman, said Athos coldly and sternly. You do not belong to the human species. You are a demon escaped from hell, to which place we are going to send you back again. Ah, you virtuous men, said Milady, but please do remember that he who shall touch a hair on my head is himself an assassin. The executioner can kill, madam, without being on that account an assassin, said the man in the red cloak, striking upon his immense sword. This is the last judge, that is all. Nocturne, as our neighbors the Germans say. And as he bound her while saying these words, Milady uttered 2 or 3 wild cries, which produced a strange and melancholy effect in flying away into the night, and losing themselves in the depths of the woods. If I am guilty, if I have committed the crimes you accuse me of, shrieked Milady, take me before a tribunal. You are not judges, you cannot condemn me. Why, I did offer you to divert, said Lord de Winter. Why did you not accept it? Because I am not willing to die, cried Milady, struggling, because I am too young to die. The woman you poisoned at Bethune was still younger than you, madam, and yet she is dead, said D'Artagnan. I will enter a cloister, I will become a nun, said Milady. You were in a cloister, said the executioner, and you left it to destroy my brother. Milady uttered a cry of terror and sank upon her knees. The executioner took her up in his arms and was carrying her toward the boat. Oh, my God, cried she, my God, are you going to drown me? These cries had something so heart-rending in them that Monsieur D'Artagnan, who had been at first the most eager in pursuit of Milady, sank down on the stump of a tree and leaned down his head, covering his ears with the palms of his hands, and yet, notwithstanding, he could not help hearing her cry and threaten. D'Artagnan was the youngest of all these men. His heart failed him. Oh, I cannot behold this frightful spectacle, said he. I cannot consent that this woman should die thus. Milady heard these few words and got a shadow of hope. D'Artagnan, D'Artagnan, cried she, remember that I loved you. The young man rose and made a step toward her, but Athos rose likewise, drew his sword, and placed himself between them. One step further, Monsieur D'Artagnan, said he, and dearly as I love you, we cross swords. Monsieur D'Artagnan sank on his knees and prayed. Come, continued Athos, executioner, do your duty. Willingly, Monseigneur, said the executioner, for I, as am a good Catholic, I firmly believe I am acting justly in performing my functions on this woman. That's well. Athos made a step toward Milady. I pardon you, said he, the ill you have done me. I pardon you for my blasted furniture, my lost honor, my defiled love, and my salvation forever compromised by the despair into which you have cast me. Die in peace. Lord de Winter advanced in his turn. I pardon you, said he, the poisoning of my brother, the assassination of his grace the Duke of Buckingham. I pardon you the death of poor Felton. I pardon you the attempts upon my own person. Die in peace. And I, said Monsieur D'Artagnan, pardon me, madam, for having by a trick unworthy of a gentleman provoked your anger, and I, in exchange, pardon you the murder of my poor love and your cruel vengeance against me. I pardon you, and I weep for you. Die in peace. I am lost, murmured Milady in English. I must die. Then she rose up herself and cast around her one of those piercing looks which seemed to dart from an eye of flame. She saw nothing, she listened, and she heard nothing. Where am I to die, said she. On the bank, replied the executioner. Then he placed her in the boat, and as he was going to set foot in it himself, Athos handed him a pursuit of gold. Here, said he, is the pay for the execution, that it may be plain we act as judges. That is correct, said the executioner, and now, in her turn, let this woman see that I am not fulfilling my trade, but my duty, and he threw the money into the river. The boat moved off toward the left-hand shore of the lines, bearing the guilty woman and the executioner. All the others remained on the right-hand bank, where they fell on their knees. The boat glided along the fairy rope under the shadow of a pale cloud which hung over the water at the moment. The troop of friends saw it gain the opposite bank. The persons cut the red-tinted horizon with a black shade. Milady, during the passage, had contrived to untie the cord which fastened her feet. On coming near to the bank, she jumped lightly on the shore and took to flight. But the soil was moist. On gaining the top of the bank, she slipped and fell upon her knees. was struck, no doubt, with a superstitious idea. She conceived that heaven denied its succor, and she remained in the altitude she had fallen in with her head drooping and her hands clasped. Then they saw from the other bank the executioner raise both his arms slowly. A moonbeam fell upon the blade of the large sword. The two arms fell with a sudden force. They heard the hissing of the scimitar and the cry of the victim. Then a truncated mass sank beneath the blow. The executioner then took off his red cloak, spread it upon the ground, laid the body in it, and threw in the head, tied it all up with the four corners, lifted it on his back, and got into the boat again. When arrived in the middle of the stream, he stopped the boat, and suspending his burden over the water, "Let the justice of God be done," cried he with a loud voice, and he let the body drop into the depths of the waters, which closed over it. Within 3 days, the four musketeers were in Paris. They had not exceeded their leave of absence, and that same evening went to pay their customary visit to Monsieur de Treville. "Well said, gentlemen," said the brave captain. "I hope you have enjoyed your excursion." "Prodigiously," replied Athos for himself and his companions. Chapter 67. Conclusion. On the 6th of the following month, the king, in compliance with the promise he had made the cardinal to return to La Rochelle, left his capital still in amazement at the news which began to spread of Buckingham's assassination. Although warned that the man she had loved so much was in great danger, the queen, when his death was announced to her, would not believe the fact, and even imprudently exclaimed, "It is false, he has just written to me." But the next day she was obliged to receive this fatal intelligence as truth. Laporte, detained in England, as everyone else had been by the orders of Charles I, arrived and was the bearer of the Duke's last dying present to the Queen. The joy of the King was great. He did not even give himself the trouble to dissemble it, and displayed it with affection before the Queen. Louis VIII, like all weak minds, was miserably wanting in generosity, but the King soon again became dull and indisposed. His brow was not one of those that are clear for long together. He felt that by returning to his camp he was about to resume his state of slavery. Nevertheless, he did return. The cardinal was for him the fascinating serpent, and he was the bird which flies from branch to branch without being able to escape. The return to La Rochelle, therefore, was profoundly dull. Our four friends, in particular, astonished their comrades. They traveled together side by side with spiritless eyes and heads depressed. Athos alone, from time to time, raised his expensive brow. A flash kindled in his eyes, and a bitter smile passed over his lips. Then, like his comrades, he sank again into his reverie. As soon as the escort arrived in any city when they had conducted the king to its quarters, the four friends either retired to their own or to some secluded cabaret where they neither drank nor played. They only conversed in a low voice, looking around attentively that no one overheard them. One day, when the king had halted to fly the pie, and the four friends, according to their custom, instead of following the sport, had stopped at a cabaret on the high road, a man coming from La Rochelle on horseback pulled up at the door to drink a glass of wine, and darted a searching glance into the chamber in which the four musketeers were sitting. as guards, Monsieur, upon our words as gentlemen, but upon our words as gentlemen likewise, added Athos, knitting his brow. Monsieur d'Artagnan shall not leave us. The Chevalier de Rochefort cast a glance backward, and saw that Porthos and Aramis had placed themselves between him and the gate. He therefore was convinced that he was completely at the mercy of these four men. Gentlemen, said he, if Monsieur d'Artagnan will surrender his sword to me and join his word to yours, I will be satisfied with your promise to convey Monsieur d'Artagnan to the quarters of Monseigneur the Cardinal. You have my word, Monsieur, and here is my sword. This suits me the better, said Rochefort, as I wish to continue my journey. If it is for the purpose of rejoining Milady, said Athos coolly, it is useless that you will not find her. What has become of her then, said Rochefort eagerly. Come back with us to the camp, and you shall know. Rochefort remained for a moment undecided, then, as they were only a day's journey from Sugares, to which place the cardinal was to come meet the king, he resolved to follow Athos's advice and go with them. Besides, this return presented him the advantage of watching over this prisoner. They resumed their route. On the morrow, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they arrived at Sugares. The cardinal there awaited Louis VIII. The minister and the king exchanged numerous caresses, felicitating each other upon the fortunate chance which had freed France from the inveterate enemy who set on all Europe against her. After which the cardinal, who had been informed that D'Artagnan was arrested and who was anxious to see him, took leave of the king, inviting him to come the next day to view the labors of the dike, which were completed. On returning in the evening to his quarters at the bridge of La Pierre, the cardinal found D'Artagnan without the sword, and the three musketeers armed, standing before the door of the house. This time, as he was well attended, he looked at them as sternly, and made a sign with his eyes and hand for D'Artagnan to follow him. D'Artagnan obeyed. We shall wait for you, D'Artagnan, said Athos loud enough for the cardinal to hear him. His eminence bent his brow, stopped for an instant, and then kept on his way without uttering a single word. D'Artagnan entered after the cardinal, and behind D'Artagnan the door was guarded. His eminence went to the chamber which served him as a closet, and made a sign to Rochefort to bring the young musketeer. Rochefort obeyed and retired. D'Artagnan remained alone in front of the cardinal. This was his second interview with Richelieu, and he afterward confessed that he felt well assured it would be his last. Richelieu remained standing, leaning against the mantelpiece. A table was between him and D'Artagnan. Monsieur, said the cardinal, you have been arrested by my orders. So I have been informed, Monseigneur. Do you know why? No, Monseigneur, for the only thing for which I could be arrested is still unknown to your eminence. Richelieu looked steadfastly at the young man. Indeed, said he, what does that mean? If Monseigneur will have the goodness to tell me in the first place what crimes are imputed to me, I will tell then your eminence what I have really done. Crimes are imputed to you that have brought down much more lofty heads than yours, Monseigneur, said the cardinal. What are they, Monseigneur, said D'Artagnan, with a calmness that astonished the cardinal himself. You are charged with having corresponded with the enemies of the kingdom. You are charged with having surprised state secrets. You are charged with having endeavored to thwart the plans of your general. And who charges me with this, Monseigneur, said D'Artagnan, who had no doubt the accusation came from Milady, a woman branded by the justice of the country, a woman who has espoused one man in France and another in England, a woman who poisoned her second husband and who attempted both to poison and assassinate me. What is all this, Monseigneur? Cried the cardinal, astonished. And what woman are you speaking of thus? Of Milady de Winter, replied D'Artagnan. Yes, of Milady de Winter, of whose crimes your eminence is doubtless ignorant, because you have honored her with your confidence. Monseigneur, said the cardinal, if Milady de Winter has committed the crimes you lay to her charge, she shall be punished. She is punished, Monseigneur. And who has punished her? We have. Is she in prison? She is dead. Dead, repeated the cardinal, could not believe what he heard. Dead? Did you say she was dead? 3 times she attempted to kill me, and I pardoned her, but she murdered the woman I love. Then my friends and I took her, tried her, and condemned her. Do undergoing the influence of a secret thought, the countenance of the cardinal, till that moment gloomy, cleared up by degrees, and recovered perfect serenity. So, said the cardinal in a tone that contrasted strongly with the severity of his words, you have constituted yourselves judges without remembering that they who punish without license to punish are assassins. Monseigneur, I swear to you that I never for an instant had the intention of defending my head against you. I willingly will submit to my punishment your eminence may please to inflict upon me. I do not hold life dear enough to be afraid of death. Yes, I know you are a man of a stout heart, Monseigneur, said the cardinal in an almost kind tone. I can therefore tell you beforehand, you shall be tried and even condemned. Another might reply that he had his pardon in his pocket. I will content myself with saying, issue your orders, Monseigneur. I am ready. Your pardon, said Richelieu, surprised. Yes, Monseigneur, said D'Artagnan, and signed by whom? By the king. And the cardinal pronounced these words with a singular expression of contempt. No, by your eminence, by me. You must be mad, Monseigneur. Monseigneur will doubtless recognize his own writing. D'Artagnan presented to the cardinal the precious piece of paper which Athos had forced from Milady, and which he had given to D'Artagnan to serve him as a safeguard. His eminence took the paper and read in a slow voice, dwelling upon every syllable. It is by my orders that the bearer of this paper has done what he has just done at the camp of Rochelle, this 5th of August, 1628. Richelieu. The cardinal, after having read these 2 lines, sank into a profound reverie. But he did not return the paper to D'Artagnan. He is meditating what sort of punishment he shall put me to death by, said D'Artagnan to himself. Let him, while he shall see how a gentleman can die. The young musketeer was then in an excellent disposition to suffer heroically. Richelieu still continued thinking, twisting and untwisting the paper in his hands. At length he raised his head, fixed his eagle look upon the loyal, open, and intelligent countenance, read upon that face, furrowed with tears, all the sufferings he had endured in the course of the last month, and reflected for the fourth time how much that youth of 21 years of age had before him, and what resources his activity, his courage, and his shrewd understanding might offer to a good master. In another respect, the crimes of the strength of mind and the infernal genius of Milady had more than once terrified him. He felt something like a secret joy at having got rid of this dangerous accomplice. He slowly tore the paper which D'Artagnan had generously placed in his hand. I am lost, said D'Artagnan to himself, and he bowed profoundly before the cardinal. Like a man who says, Lord, thy will be done, the cardinal went up to the table and, without sitting down, wrote a few lines upon a parchment of which 2/3 were already filled up, and affixed his seal to it. That is my condemnation, thought D'Artagnan. He will spare me the ennui of the Bastille or the tediousness of a trial. That's very kind of him. Here, Monsieur, said the cardinal to the young man, I have taken from you 1 signed blank to give you another. The name is wanting in this commission. You can write it yourself. D'Artagnan took the paper hesitatingly and cast his eyes over it. It was a lieutenant's commission in the Musketeers. D'Artagnan fell at the feet of the cardinal. Monseigneur, said he, my life is yours, and yours henceforward dispose of it. But this favor which you bestow upon me I do not merit. I have 3 friends who are more meritorious and more worthy. You are a brave youth, D'Artagnan, interrupted the cardinal, tapping him familiarly on the shoulder, charmed at having subdued this rebellious nature. Do with this commission what you will, only remember not enough the same. Though the name be a blank, it was to you that I gave it. I shall never forget it, replied D'Artagnan. Your eminence may be certain of that. The cardinal turned round and said in a low voice, Rochefort. The chevalier, who no doubt was near the door, entered immediately. Rochefort, said the cardinal, you see Monsieur D'Artagnan. I receive him among the number of my friends. Embrace then, and be prudent if you have any wish to preserve your heads. Rochefort D'Artagnan saluted coolly, but the cardinal was there, observing them with his vigilant eye. They left the chamber at the same time. We shall meet again, shall we not, monsieur? When you please, said D'Artagnan. An opportunity will offer itself, replied Rochefort. What's that? Said the cardinal, opening the door. The two men smiled at each other, shook hands, and bowed to his eminence. We were beginning to grow impatient, said Athos. Well, here I am, my friends, replied D'Artagnan, not only free, but in favor. Tell us all about it. This evening, accordingly, that same evening, D'Artagnan repaired to the quarters of Athos, whom he found in a fair way of emptying a bottle of Spanish wine, an occupation which he religiously went through every night. He related all that had taken place between the cardinal and himself, and drawing the commission from his pocket, "Here, my dear Athos," said he, "this belongs to you naturally." Athos smiled with one of his sweet and expressive smiles. "My friend," said he, "for Athos this is too much, for the Count de la Fère it is too little. Keep the commission, it is yours. Alas, you have purchased it dearly enough." D'Artagnan left Athos's chamber and went to that of Porthos. He found him clothed in a magnificent dress covered with splendid embroidery, admiring himself before a glass. Ah, is that you, friend D'Artagnan?" exclaimed he. "How do you think these garments fit me, eh?" "Wonderfully well," said D'Artagnan, "but I am come to offer you a dress which will become you still better." "What's that?" asked Porthos. "That of a lieutenant of musketeers." D'Artagnan related to Porthos the substance of his interview with the cardinal, and taking the commission from his pocket, "Here, my friend," said he, "write your name upon it and become my officer." Porthos cast his eyes over the commission and returned it to D'Artagnan, to the great astonishment of the young man. "Yes," said he, "yes, that would flatter me very much, but I should not have time enough to enjoy the distinction. During our expedition to Bethune, the husband of my Duchess died, so that my dear friend, the coffer of the defunct, holding out its arm, I should not have time enough to enjoy the distinction during our expedition to Bethune. The husband of my Duchess died, so that my dear friend, the coffer of the defunct, holding out his arms to me, I shall marry the widow. Look here, I at this moment was trying on my wedding suit. No, keep the lieutenant. See, my dear fellow, keep it." And he returned the commission to D'Artagnan. The young man then entered the apartment of Aramis. He found him kneeling before the breathy, with his head leaning upon an open book of prayer. He described to him his interview with the cardinal, and for the third time drawing his commission from his pocket, "You, our friend, our intelligence, our invisible protector," said he, "accept the commission. Accept this commission. You have merited it more than any of us by your wisdom and your counsels, always followed by such happy results." "Alas, my dear friend," said Aramis, "our late adventures have disgusted me with life and with the sword. This time my determination is irrevocably taken. After the siege I shall enter the house of the Lazarus. Keep the commission, D'Artagnan. The profession of arms suits you. You will be a brave and adventurous captain." D'Artagnan, his eyes moist with gratitude, though beaming with joy, went back to Athos, whom he found still at table, contemplating the charms of his last glass of Malaga by the light of his lamp. "Well," said he, "and they likewise have refused me." "That, my dear friend, is because nobody is more worthy than yourself." And he took a pen, wrote the name of D'Artagnan on the commission, and returned it to him. "I shall then no longer have friends," said the young man. "Alas, nothing but bitter recollections." And he let his head sink down upon his hands, while two large tears rolled down his cheeks. "You are young," replied Athos, "and your bitter recollections have time to be changed into sweet remembrances." Epilogue. La Rochelle, deprived of the assistance of the English fleet and of the reinforcements promised by Buckingham, surrendered after a siege of a year on the 20th of October, much coveted